if you'd have told me this, like, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago or maybe even 8 years ago, or heck, maybe even like 6 years ago, I might have
Uh-huh.
said, "This guy's like, what a quack," you know?
Oh,
But
yeah.
but now I'm like, "No, I get you." Like, I know what you're saying, and it does make
Yeah.
sense to me.
Welcome to the Carla Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla. I just had an awesome conversation with Greg Garwood, and Greg is the kind of guy that just keeps leveling up. But what I didn't understand about him, because I knew he was very successful, and I could just see how he was just going to do anything, whatever it took to reach his goals. What I didn't know is that he had struggled with anxiety his whole life. Like ever since he was a kid, he'd struggled with anxiety. And so it was really valuable to kind of see what he had done to process that in his life and how he had overcome that. And of course, he's still dealing with some of that. And so that's what's interesting about it too. It's not like he's saying I've arrived, but there's so many people that struggle with anxiety that I've spoken with. So I think this will be very valuable if you struggle with anxiety or if you know people that do. He also had a nervous breakdown, so like how that was processed, how he couldn't even function in his life. So I'm just really excited to share this episode with you, and let's get into the conversation. All right, well,
Yep.
I have Greg Garwood here with me on the Carla Show. Greg, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thanks, Carla. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I reached out to you, Greg, because honestly, there was something about you, the way that you were, and how do I describe it? Like you were like omnipresent on the internet, like omnipresent on social media. I was like, this guy is just like, it's like you're commenting on every video, and not just my stuff, but like tons of people's stuff. And I'm like, this guy's got it going on. Like you are an absolute rock star. And I think I called you a rock star once when I was messaging you. And I was just like, man, like you know how to be everywhere. Like, so I have a question. Greg, do you get help with that, or do you do it all by yourself?
With just the Facebook, like
Yeah, like,
omnipresent part,
yeah.
that's a lot of that's me. So my wife Kristen and I work together and all this stuff. So I mean, we're both doing our own things also, but we work together and we team coach and all that. So
Okay.
I mean, we do a lot of things together, but as far as the actual posting and commenting and all that, that's me.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. So you're
Yep.
just like, yeah, you just go. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do first, Greg? So people are like, okay, who is this Greg Garwood? Like, he does this stuff with his wife. He's on social media. What's going on? So why don't you just give us a quick kind of headshot here of what you do?
Sure. So currently, my wife Kristen and I have a company we call Brilliant Life Fitness, website at the same address, and we are online fitness and health coaches, and basically just offer just that. I mean, fitness programs, workout programs, and also nutrition programs, and do a lot of things differently than a lot of people do. So that's kind of our thing.
Yeah.
We use a lot of strategy, and I don't know if that's because of my fire service stuff or what that is, but we actually use a lot of strategy in how our workouts and nutrition go and how they're paired together. But try to keep it very simple so people aren't tortured with all the tracking, counting stuff. So we get away from a lot of that kind of stuff and keep it more simple.
Good.
But because of the strategy part, it makes up for the difference. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's kind of that part in a nutshell. We're just really building and growing that business. Been at it for quite some time, but have made our pivots and all that good stuff along the way as we hit walls and things worked or didn't and all that. So
Yeah, and that's how we met, you and I. It was like, doing the business thing, and then you kind of reached out to me, and we kind of went back and forth, and then we had a conversation to kind of like just sort of pick each other's brain, I think was
Yeah.
more or less kind of what we were doing. And it's interesting that you say that you do things different, because I do too. And I think that's
Right.
kind of where we connect, is that you aren't like, I don't want to just do this cookie cutter program. I want to have some strategy. I want to have something that's a little bit different, something that maybe stands out a bit. And I feel very much the same way about my program. And I've had people, some naysayers or just people saying kind of like, I don't understand what you're doing, Carla. Why are you doing it that way? But I'm like, this is my path. This is what I'm going to
Yep.
do. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
You have your business model, right? And
Yes.
it's not exactly like everybody else's, even in our coaching program that we're in together, right?
exactly.
But that's part of the beauty of it, right?
That's the part of being an entrepreneur, is you get to do it your way, right?
Right.
What you think is best for your clients, not necessarily what
Right.
maybe other people say. So why
Right.
don't you take us back, Greg? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where did you grow up? What, school, hobbies, interests, that kind of stuff, just to give us some context here.
Actually, so from the U.S., grew up in Illinois, kind of mid-state around in a town, but in farm country kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came from there, and my parents made the mistake of letting me visit Colorado during the earlier part of my life to visit a friend that moved away. So I saw it in the summer, and, you know, I started kind of snowboarding and some stuff like that when I was about 13, and I literally started on like a sledding hill, right? So just doing things like that. But I always had this draw to sports of that nature, and skateboarding, snowboarding, things like that. Loved the outdoors, always played in the woods. And so I was just really had a draw to Colorado. So loved where I grew up. It was a great place and everything to grow up, but I've just had this magnetism out here. So I've actually been out in Colorado for about 25 years or so, I think, or close to it. And lived between city and mountains and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. That's kind of just, I guess, the basis of where, but
Yeah.
And just that magnetism of lifestyle for me of like, I really love the mountain life and all that kind of stuff. And
Were you a good student, Greg, in school?
in the middle, so we keep talking about doing things differently, right? Like,
Right.
so I would end up in like some advanced courses and stuff like that. I struggled a lot, meaning like I was intelligent and I knew I was intelligent, but I wasn't smart the way other people were. And so I struggled a lot in learning in traditional ways. And so like in math, let's say, I actually learned how to do math and taught myself how to do math a different way because I didn't understand how the teachers were often teaching me. And I've now found out these days talking to people with kids, I don't have kids, but that now math is kind of taught the way I kind of figured out how to do it and breaking things apart. And so I did fairly well, you know, like I am very driven and also had this thing about wanting to be good enough and smart enough and, you know, cared about, appreciated, all that kind of stuff, and didn't always feel that way when I was younger. And so I think I was always wanting to make sure I had my parents' approval, that kind of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So good or bad, I mean, good enough. And like, you know, I'd get A's, B's, maybe a C here and there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always easy.
Did you enjoy school?
Not that much, not really.
No.
I wouldn't say that much at all.
Yeah.
I just did what I had to do.
Yeah.
Um,
So what got
yeah.
you into fitness, Greg? Like, when did you start getting, was that more later on or was that more when you were younger? You did say you did skateboarding and you like to be active.
Yeah, I'm a very active kid. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood, but like woods all around and stuff like that. So the buddy that moved out to Colorado when I was in like 5th grade, he and I grew up just literally running around in the woods, like swinging on vines and stuff that we'd cut and, you know, over ravines and running around chasing crawdads in streams and that kind of thing, right?
Cool.
So always into that, always very active, you know, playing around the neighborhood. I mean, that was back in the day when you ran around playing games in the neighborhood with the neighborhood kids, right? Was super common, and there was no cell phone. There was nothing like that, right?
Yeah.
Our parents actually in the neighborhood had bells. Often they would ring these giant bells so we'd know when to come home. Things
that would save my voice. I have 6 kids and we have a big farm. And so the kids get everywhere and I'm like, come on in, it's time for supper. And like my voice, you know, it's like, a bell. I should get a bell.
My parents had a bell literally like this big. And,
oh, wow.
and then other neighbors had one and we could tell the pitch difference. So anyway,
that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, well, tell us a little bit about like your story, Greg. Like, why were you kind of insecure? Why did you feel like you needed to matter? Where did that come from? I mean, everybody feels that way. They want to matter. They feel insecure about certain things. But what's your story?
So I guess starting off super young, like way back, and some of this stuff I've learned more recently about myself through help I've reached out for and everything. And so I was given up for adoption when I was born, basically, right? And so immediately separated from my mother, all that kind of stuff. And later learned that can cause a lot of the stuff that I've had in me. Didn't realize it, of course, when I was a baby. But so I've definitely had a lot of things that were worse for me than I realized, like weren't average, if that makes sense. Like when you say everybody has those things, absolutely. We all have fears, like we all want to be good enough. We all wonder if we're good enough, right? We question ourselves, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of pretty extreme anxiety as a kid, and starting off at a very young age. Again, I can remember grade school, getting sent home from school because I'd forget to do like a simple homework assignment or something. And that would create so much anxiety that I would get sick at my stomach. I would have like GI problems and everything and literally get sent home sick.
Wow.
Because my anxiety was so severe. And I just kind of learned to live with that sort of thing and tried to mask it and just put on a face, put on a facade, and
What would trigger
try to,
your
try to be good, right?
Yeah, what would trigger your anxiety?
Uh, Anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was, I mean, a lot when if I felt like I was doing anything wrong,
Okay.
that I would disappoint someone, disappoint a parent, teacher, authority figure. A lot of that was really bad. My dad would talk about that even when I was a baby to toddler, that if he slightly raised his voice, that I would just start bawling. So a lot of this stuff, it's weird for me to talk about because it's a lot of stuff, honestly, that's not very approved of as a dude in the world. So that kind of thing's changing. But so it's taken me a long time to get comfortable enough to even talk about it and not feel like I'd be judged or not judge myself and just quite frankly not care anymore and realize that that's the way it was for me. And those are the things I had to overcome. And while we all have to overcome them, some of those things were very extreme for me and took a long time for me to overcome, and a lot of pain and anguish and effort, frankly, and eventually like study and help and all kinds of stuff.
So, so the idea that a man doesn't show emotion or a man shouldn't be getting anxiety, we should be tough and strong. That's probably one of the things that held you back, maybe from getting help sooner, possibly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It was not thought of, approved of. And I mean, the funny thing is, I mean, there are those stereotypes, right? But talking to my wife, Kristen, and things like that over time, I mean, all these things, men and women have them both. I mean, I don't think women necessarily, just because they're a woman, feel like they can talk about them more and it's okay, right? It depends on their circle a little bit, how they were raised, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But a little more from at least those eras, I think, especially, like I said, I think it's changing a little bit these days. But yeah, guys, definitely, it was not embraced or anything. You'd be made fun of, right, if you were emotional or something like that. I frankly think that's crap. It's normal to be emotional and let these things out and deal with them. Sure, do you have to toughen up and cowboy up sometimes, or however you want to say it?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? Like, we have to learn to have grit. We have to learn to be tough. But that's exactly what a lot of these deficiencies, I guess, or challenges taught me when I was struggling with how I felt about myself, worrying about being judged by others, what they thought of me. Frankly, I got really tough over time because I had to learn to suck it up and get past it and move forward in life anyway, because I still had this underlying kind of drive and I guess some ambition, but I didn't know where to direct it for ages.
Okay.
So,
So how did that change? Tell us a bit of the story. Like, so you'd had anxiety and stuff. What did getting help with that look like for you?
excuse me, early on in life, I didn't really know a lot of it. I literally just tripped over and kind of started figuring out when I was young, like as a kid.
Yeah.
It was trial and error. And I did it, what I now know is maybe kind of ineffectively at the time,
Yes.
meaning, kind of stuff it and mask it and things like that.
Yes.
Because you got to function, right? And so I did what I had to do to just keep going, muddle through and, get decent grades, even though I was freaked out or whatever it was, right? And just push through no matter what. So, or, succeed in coursework and, graduate high school. I mean, I went to college, even though I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. It was kind of the expectation in the family I was raised in. So I got a degree,
What did you get a degree in?
I have a degree in recreation administration.
Okay.
So, kind of either public or private, a little bit of like business administration, but with studying like theories of play and recreation. And so a lot of that's very stuck in me, which was already innate anyway. So then I kind of studied what I loved anyway.
Nice. Good.
So, but I did something with that for a little while. And then I'm like, I'm in my 20s. I was trying to do the management thing and all that and going like, this is really not that fun. I'm still in the Midwest. I really want to be in Colorado. That's where my heart is. And so eventually kind of made a big shift and took a leap. That was one of my first big leaps in life, I think, really pursuing my own dream finally for once.
Yeah. And so tell me about, did you go to therapy? Did you go to counseling? Like, how old were you? Or like, what time in your life were you like, okay, I think I'm getting a handle on this anxiety. I think I'm starting to get a handle on how to deal with this in a productive way.
Still working on it.
Okay. I was going to say, I don't think you would have arrived. It's just like most of us don't arrive at a place where we're like, everything's perfect now. But like, what steps have you taken? Because there's people right now, Greg,
Yeah.
that are watching this, and they're
Sure.
going to be, the listeners are going to be like, okay, I have anxiety,
Yes.
or, I struggle with not feeling inadequate and stuff. So
Mhm.
what did you do, and how would you help somebody in that same situation to maybe
Sure.
get the help that they need sooner, so that they don't maybe have to struggle along as long as you did?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, going just one step before that, I'll say that we talked a little about this. That I used a lot of low-level coping mechanisms that mask it temporarily, make you feel better temporarily, but aren't effective in the long run for actually solving the root cause, root problem, and getting you past it long term. The anxiety, the feeling not good enough, any of that stuff. So, I was at a fairly young age in my teens, starting to drink alcohol. And I know a lot of people do that, but I was taking it to extremes and binge drinking, things like that. And, got into some recreational drugs, and I wasn't injecting things or anything, but did my share of that kind of stuff and experimenting to just really try to mask and feel better in any way I could. For anybody that knows about hormones and neurotransmitters and all that, I was basically stimulating dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter and hormone that kind of drives us and makes us do things habitually, right? And so, but it's a feel-good pleasure type of thing also. So it's what drives, like, say, sex, drugs, rock and roll type of lifestyle, right? Because those things temporarily feel good, but they're not fulfilling in the long term. So I was doing those things, knowing that, I'm trying to work through this and understand more about myself. I remember even, I had a really, really short marriage in my early 20s when I was still in college that really went poorly right off the bat, ended in divorce really rapidly, and kind of was trying to figure some things out then, because there was no really opportunity for reconciliation or anything offered or anything like that. It was just done. So, my parents were involved trying to kind of help me out. I was again adopted very young. So a funny little part here is, right, I'm like 6'1", over 200 pounds. My whole family that I was adopted into is like 5'4", and nobody weighs above like 150. I was as tall as my dad or taller in 5th grade.
Wow.
So I was for many, many reasons felt kind of black sheep detached and a lot of that stuff. And so that didn't help a lot of these feelings. Not their fault. They did a good job, but it was just what I was going through. So to move past it, the anxiety, the not good enough, all that stuff. Again, some of it was grit and just pushing through when I was younger, and just knowing I wanted to do more, knowing I wanted to be better. And that was enough drive for me to try. And then eventually, again, my parents kind of helped me in those 20s around that divorce situation. Like, they tried to help me go to a therapist. But the fact is, to me, and for me at least, this may work for some people, but like, it was more still that talk therapy era. And it's actually proven now and shown in the psychology world, that a lot of that is worse for people because you're reliving those traumas over and over, or feelings over and over. And so it really was not effective for me. And I talked about how, and this is not meant to sound arrogant, but I'm really intelligent in a lot of ways, but then not traditionally intelligent in ways. Like, I'm very intuitive. I have, honestly, again, stereotyping, in my marriage now, and I know I'm bouncing around some, but in my marriage now, like, I have a lot of traits in communication and relationship that are more like the stereotypical female. My wife and I, as we were having problems a year or so ago, read a book together. And as we're reading the book, it was written several years ago. And so those stereotypes kind of existed. And when they're explaining what guys are like and need to change, and girls are like and need to change, we had to flip-flop roles and read the book as, he instead of she, and my wife would have to read, she instead of he, right? So again, I have a lot of underlying soft traits, which tends to catch people by surprise, I think, a lot of times. I don't look like I would, I've often been called a hard ass by appearance and things like that. And sometimes even in my demeanor. But you have to crack the surface and get in beneath that, right? I'm an introvert at heart. I've learned to be an extrovert where I need to be, right? In business and things like that. So again, I've had to overcome a lot of those obstacles of how I was, who I was, to get where I want to go. And so going back to that kind of therapy didn't work for me, the talk therapy thing. And it took years for me to realize that just wasn't going to work, and that I had more deep-seated underlying things, like we all do, that it required something different to do. but honestly, back then, I'm 46 years old right now. So we're talking 20, 25 years ago, just some of these therapies hadn't really come into play. And so, so I guess I'm going to come back to your question here in a minute
Sure,
and
yeah.
answer exactly what I used more recently.
Okay.
But this process was, honestly, Krista, my wife, brought home somebody, one of her friends introduced her to, you've heard of maybe the movie or book, The Secret.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have.
Yes.
So, very positive psychology, law of attraction kind of stuff. Like she brought that home, and that was probably 15 years ago now, ish.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe a little less than that, but we kind of started going like, like what we think about matters, how we're thinking and the thoughts we have and what we do with those thoughts matters and dictates what comes into our life, what we start to create, what we move towards, right? And that started to make a big shift in us, both of us. And so, but we still had a lot of underlying root problems that were kind of messing us up, right? So we started on this course, and I never used to read much. I read textbooks when I had to, just to get by. Now I'm a voracious reader. I read like crazy, but I read things that teach me something. That's just how I am. Mm-hmm. And so I started kind of getting into listening to audio or reading some books and things that taught me things to help me become better. So I really started this journey a lot, I will say on my own, but not really, because I was using either digital mentors or mentors in books that could teach me how to make a lot of these things better, how to feel better about myself, how to change my psychology, how to move into more positive psychology. So that was kind of the start, and at that time frame, 10 or 15 years ago, and it's just been a gradual progression. And so if this is helping somewhat wrap what you're talking about, I want to get this out because more recently, in the past year or so, literally, it's been treatments like there's something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprogramming.
Okay.
So this is where we talked about talk therapy, right? And how that's on your conscious level, right? It's not repairing the underlying root cause problems that are in your subconscious from all these traumas and dramas from a young age that get set in us and can trip us up for life, right? Unless you decide to dig it out, change your limiting beliefs, right? And rearrange these thought patterns, feelings, emotions, and repair them so that you can have a more fulfilling, enriching life, right?
Give me an
Does that make some
example.
sense?
Give me an example of one of these limiting beliefs.
So, there's so many. So just the whole I'm not good enough thing. So for myself, right? So I was a fireman, a firefighter. I ended up a fire lieutenant and paramedic, did that for a career for years. Before I did that, like, again, I was a big kid, but I was a sheepish kid, like wasn't very comfortable in my own skin, was introverted, all this stuff. Well, okay, does that make for a good firefighter? You got to be kind of like bold, charge in, right? All that kind of stuff. And so it was in my like mid to late 20s, I kind of volunteered a little bit and learned a little about that. And, it wasn't until my early 30s when I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life that I'm like, I was working a construction job. I'd worked hospitality jobs. I've done everything under the sun because I didn't know what to do with myself. And finally realized I'd really like to be a firefighter full time as a career, and kind of had poked around in it, had some failures, tried to go through paramedic school and had to drop out. I was trying to work full time and do that. Wasn't working. Eventually I was working construction at the time, climbing towers and rappelling and stuff, building cell sites. And my wife knew I was just pretty much miserable, not fulfilled, and supported me in going like, hey, why don't you just stop that? Why don't you go back to school, get your paramedic, go to a fire academy and get the job you want. And again, a lot of times before this, I had tested a little bit for fire departments, but like had no confidence, didn't believe they would take me, didn't believe I was good enough. When in reality, like I'm kind of prototypical physically firefighter, and really underneath, because I have that soft, compassionate side, you have to have that because we're not just running into fires, right? We're doing EMS, ambulance work, and taking care of patients and people that way. So it requires the compassion and everything too, which I'm chock full of. So I was finally beginning to attach some of those things and realize that some of what I thought were my weaknesses could actually become strengths in something that I wanted to do. So I didn't believe I could do it. Didn't believe they'd take me. Like the tests can be rigorous, very, very competitive. Like in a lot of cities and everything, like thousands of people apply and for 10 jobs, that kind of thing. So And, it's physical testing, mental, like intelligence testing, all that kind of stuff mixed together. And so anyway, so there was that shift, right? And so, and that was even before I read these books and stuff. It was just a gradual progression over time of, I'd try one little more thing also is something I started early on, meaning if I thought I could only do this, I wouldn't try for this, but I would try for this, just a half inch ahead, right?
Nice.
So I think that realization, those little bitty wins over time helped me also and moved me to where I would actually then, went back to school, actually crushed paramedic school, crushed my fire academy, was like top of both my classes and, got my dream job and actually got it in the mountains where I really wanted to be.
Oh, perfect.
We relocated. And so before that, I'd lived like ski bum life and everything, just working in hotels and whatnot, because I wanted to snowboard my butt off and have fun. That was one of my original dreams. So I actually realized that dream, which a lot of people probably thought I was a slacker at the time, frankly. But for me, that was it was beautiful. It was exactly what I wanted, living in the mountains, right across from the ski area, walk across and get on the lift, ski bum life. It was great. So that was one first bigger success for me after relocating cross country. Then inched my way towards the fire career. Again, finally did well after failures at school and everything, trying to move forward towards the fire career. Finally succeeded, did really well, got the gig, and then, went through the next. I learned this from a guy named Bob Proctor, who's longtime kind of success teacher and guru. And he calls them terror barriers that we all go through, right? When I mentioned that half inch further. So it's going through your next terror barrier, right? And then you cross that threshold and that's not scary anymore. So you got to find the next one, right?
Yeah.
That scares you every day, right? He calls them terror barriers. So my next terror barrier was to then be comfortable in my fire job, because now I'm out there trying to be a paramedic, working this job with a lot of these guys that are pretty gruff and everything, right? And just straightforward. And so while I had those qualities, they hadn't probably fully emerged yet. So it was bringing those things into being for me, and I had to really get comfortable with running onto that scene. And I'm the guy, like I'm the paramedic that has to try to save this person's life, right?
Yeah. Pressure.
You got to have confidence to do that. Yeah, lots of pressure.
Yeah.
Thank God pressure creates diamonds, right?
Yes. Yes.
So eventually just all of those things, I think, just kept compressing me into the diamond I'm still becoming. And hopefully I become a bigger diamond as I go. But so it's that principle, I guess, of just keeping on doing something every day that scares you, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah.
Some people can make these big leaps. Some people, it's little leaps. And over time I made little leaps, but then my leaps got bigger. Yeah. So I started believing in myself more. And after a while, like I loved my fire career. It's made me who I am today. Been largely responsible for that, to where I started teaching a lot, right? And so that got me more comfortable in the fire service. I was teaching a lot, both fire, rescue, and EMS, and then kept moving forward. And then I kind of came back full circle, because at about 19 is when I first started really getting into fitness, lifting weights. And a lot of that was, again, not feeling good about myself. My best friend introduced me to it. That started helping me feel better about myself by taking care of my fitness, my appearance. I was scrawny, honestly. Like I was a bigger, taller kid, but I had zero shape or muscle to me at all. I've got before and after photos of all this stuff. So I was the scrawny kid first, right? Put on muscle, was reasonably fit in my 20s and everything. And then in my 30s, I actually got overweight and fat by like 35 pounds. So I've had to build the muscle and keep from being scrawny first. And then I've had to be fat and try to lose all the fat. So over time, I learned all that. And in around 2012, really just started, again, reading, studying. And that's where I started putting together the mastery of what I teach now, coming back full circle to after leaving the fire service to starting our own fitness business, failing at that miserably over time, meaning we had a really good, solid program, but the method we were using was kind of older school, trying to sell PDF ebooks and things like that initially. And we were hitting a lot of walls and really nearly failed and could have lost everything because we'd lived off savings for nearly 2 years. So this is wrapping into more towards the direction of you knowing me. And so, frankly, as last fall, things were going poorly in our business. We were very stressed. And my wife and I, a lot of the things that were coming up now, because we're trying to work together, live together. Our gym is in the lower level of our house. So we're pretty much doing everything from home back then. And a lot of underlying problems for Chris and I individually and together were coming to a head, right? And I'll tell you right now, we were on the verge of moving towards divorce. not even a year ago. And so that was going on. It got bad enough where we finally, kind of saw some light. And again, I talked about earlier, we started to read this book together called How Marriages Succeed or Fail, John Gottman, if anybody's interested. Helped us tremendously with how to talk better, communicate better, and find a more congruent style of conflict, because you are going to conflict. It's just a matter of how you do it, right?
Is that the book where you guys had to sort of reverse roles when you're reading it? Or was that a different book? Okay.
That book. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we actually, I invented something, I called it Marriage Book Club. So like every Sunday we'd read a chapter, and every Sunday we'd go over it together and talk about it.
Yeah.
So we started studying that together. Kristen was going and doing some therapy then for some of her underlying stuff. She grew up with an alcoholic father. So again, we both had our underlying root issues that were causing difficulty of us trying to stay married together and function together normally.
That probably really had nothing to do with each other, but it was just the baggage that you had. You bring it into the marriage, and then it's like, okay, let's start, butting heads here. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Get
so
it.
like biggest pile of stress ever, right? So we were on the verge of that. We started repairing that, making the marriage better. Then it was like January. This is hard for me to talk about and say. I basically had and they don't call it this anymore, but I had what used to be called a nervous breakdown, where all this stuff came to a head, and all this stuff of where I tried to repair it and read books and learn and all this stuff, right? Trying to feel good enough, to like myself enough, to think highly enough of myself, and then to actually behave in the way I really wanted to in life. Like a lot of my behaviors were still off. Like these underlying things were dragging me in the wrong direction. And I have to take responsibility for anything I did wrong, right? Like that's the way it works. But we know that, right, underlying things can help direct you in negative directions. And so that all came to a head with the business that wasn't going the direction we wanted to. We'd already been living for a year and a half on savings, trying to just go all in and make this happen after I retired from the fire service. Before that, actually going back, Kristen had lost her job. And so she'd started doing this full-time first before I dropped out, and we really both went for it. So we went for like some big, massive risks after being these scaredy cats, right?
Yeah.
Finally evolved into that, and really just like calculated risk. We thought about what we're doing. We didn't just leap, but our calculations were wrong. It wasn't working yet. And so again, basically collapsed into a heap, couldn't function daily, had insomnia so bad, like I couldn't sleep hardly at all last night. At night, I was lucky to get a couple of hours of sleep pieced together. I was like massive sweats all night, like soaking the bed kind of thing, sweating because I was just freaking out, everything swirling in my head. And it was like everything that had ever happened in life or how you ever felt about yourself that was not going well for you, didn't feel good, all was just coming to a head. And I guess I felt like I was the engine of this train that all of a sudden the brakes were slammed on, it stopped at a wall, and all the train cars were piling into it, right? And just smashing into this mess. And that mess was me. And so I really kind of exploded all over the place. Thankfully, Kristen and I had repaired our marriage, and we're on a good track there. She supported me, talked me into going to see a doctor, to see about, whatever was going to take me on some meds or whatever to just get me to be able to function in daily life. Cause I couldn't work. I couldn't think. Like I can't describe it. I thought this stuff was fake. I didn't think it could happen to me. I knew people had psychological stuff, right? Like this, right? But I thought, erroneously thought that if you had all that, something's wrong with you or something, right? Not true. People have it. You can be very, very normal in the world, right? Whatever normal is, and still have these things happen and still crash and explode and be a mess, right? And so that was kind of soul crushing. Like I was once again putting myself down because I was going through this. So I'm in my worst state ever in life, and I'm beating myself up for it, right? So anyway, she gets me to go to the doc, gets me on some meds, but those take like months to work. And so I talked about EMDR earlier. Kristen had done some EMDR, and then, so again, eye movement desensitization reprogramming. There's something called RRT. It's rapid resolution therapy. And so both of those things are alternatives to talk therapy that actually get into your subconscious mind, where all these patterns rest of how we feel about ourselves, limiting beliefs, about what we believe we can or can't do. Money doesn't grow on trees, right? And you're never going to be rich or something like that, even if you'd like to be wealthy. Like those can be limiting beliefs that you hear from when you're a little kid, ages 2 to 6 even. Those things really get ingrained. So now we're trying to to delete and reframe all those things, right? And eliminate those limiting beliefs, those old thought patterns and belief patterns. And so that's what these treatments are for. And what I learned is these types of treatments in about 3 to 6 sessions have the same effect on you and improvement as 6 to 12 months of talk therapy. And it grows over time. Over about a 6-month period, you keep improving.
So how does it work? Now everyone's curious. Tell us how to be better.
It's actually fun and hilarious, I think, in a lot of ways. So I did couple that, just, like right now I'm going to see somebody who's almost like a life coach to me as a therapist, but like I use cognitive behavioral therapy to still keep improving my patterns and behaviors over time and my thought patterns. And she still does EMDR with me on that. But so those are three things I would highly recommend is those 3 treatments. So I think they're huge. It's been life-changing for Kristen, life-changing for me. And again, coming from some pretty deep traumas. So, and poor beliefs about ourselves and playing small in the world because of it. So, and now we're playing huge. So how does that work? Well, the great thing I will say is that you don't have to sit there and relive every trauma, right? You don't have to sit there and relive all those old stories. I've got a great person here. If anybody's interested, please reach out, by the way. Who does these sorts of therapies, but she basically would talk you through, she'd ask you some questions. So she'd get a framework of kind of some patterns that happened to you in the past, a divorce, a death in the family, like I had a best friend die when I was 26 that kind of messed me up as well. So she'll take those things, and even like me being given up pre-verbal when I was a baby, like just born, right? That can cause traumas. And now I've read articles on that, scientifically proven as well, right? So I would have thought that was garbage, right? And not true, but it is. So she was able to go back to those framework of kind of just the general framework of those stories without me reliving all of it. And there are methods to where they walk you through kind of a new story. Like you actually literally rewrite that story so it's not horrible anymore. You turn it into more of a positive outcome story. And some of them, you literally create a new memory, no joke. And so they talk you through all this, but then the eye movement part is, again, a scientific principle. And like they can do things like holding a pen and having you track it so that your eyes are literally going back and forth side to side. And it's that bilateral movement, one side to the other, that ingrains these patterns into you. You can actually be tapping like this. And so they talk you through it, and then you like tap it in or do the eye movements to make it sink in your subconscious. That's one of the things that has been found over the last 30 years to help with it.
Well, I think of like neurological problems. What does the doctor do? Like, follow this pen. Can you see, and then tap your shoulders and like, so that makes sense to me. Okay.
It's like assessing a stroke, right? But they're not assessing you. They're actually changing patterns. So, wow. So that's one thing. The RRT part, the rapid resolution therapy, is so I'll bare my soul here. So one of the techniques for that was when you have thoughts of like, I shoulda, I coulda, I woulda about yourself. Like, I should have treated my ex-wife better, right? I shouldn't have drank too much that night and talked like a jerk, right? Well, when you say that about yourself, like, is there anything you can do about that right now, 20 years later? Not a thing, right? So it is what it is, and you just have to accept that. But if you're beating yourself up for it, you've got to find a way to stop, and that's not so easy. So like one thing would be to say, that's ridiculous. Like she's talking you through these stories, and I can't even do it, but it's like she's telling you this new story and almost making it like fun, light, and entertaining and happy. And when I would talk about that thought of what I should have or could have or would have done better, right? You say, that's ridiculous. And then she has you get an image. So my image was of Wile E. Coyote, right? From Roadrunner.
Yeah.
So I would think of Wile E. Coyote with the rocket roller skates launching off because I thought that was hilarious and ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd have to attach that new thought pattern to it. And that helps dissociate from the old memory and associate a new, happier memory pattern, or even just go along with that old memory. So when you think of it, even though you're thinking of the disturbing memory, it's got this happy thing of Wile E. Coyote and the roller skates. And it's a ridiculous happy memory now in a way, if that makes sense. So it's strange stuff. It may seem weird. It's like, I didn't think in the past that I would do yoga or acupuncture or anything like that. And I do.
Yeah. If you would have
So
talked to me, Greg, if you'd have told me this, like maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, or maybe even 8 years ago, or heck, maybe even like 6 years ago, I might have said, this guy's like, what a quack, But now I'm like, no, I get you. Like, I know what you're saying, and it does make sense to me. And I feel like your whole story, from what I've heard so far, is you getting back up, doing the next thing, leveling up. And even behind you, I can see, it says level up there. So, I mean, that's like, and that's important. And I mean, that's my message. That's kind of the story of my life too. And again, how you were talking about those thresholds or something where it's like something is scary, you do it. And then it's like, now the next thing is scary. And then you do that thing and you just keep pushing through. And I really encourage people to do that. Because when it comes to weight loss, when it comes to just getting in shape, when it comes to so many areas of life, you have to do those scary things so that they don't become scary anymore. And I remember like when I would be in church, there was one thing that used to bother me so much. So we would have the little kids come up and we would do this little kid song with them. And so I would do it, and it wasn't really a big deal. I didn't love kids. It wasn't my favorite thing, but I just did it because nobody else wanted to do it. And then it got to the point where I had to do it all the time because these adults, they didn't want to do it. They were too scared to do it. They're like, no, I don't want to do the kid song. I'm like, seriously, you guys, like, you got to break that threshold. This is just a kid song. Like, what other things in your life are you not doing that's holding you back? And I think when we all just stop and think, what is that thing that you're afraid of that if you just did it, it would take you to that next level? That's what you need to go and do right now. Go do it. Make it happen,
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah, it totally resonates with me.
Got to move through the terror barriers and on to the next one.
Yes, the terror barriers. That's what it is. Yes, I like that. I like
Yep.
that. So terror as in afraid.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. As in, like, you're scared to death of it. Terror, yeah.
Like the first time I did public speaking, I was so scared, or class presentation, or air band competitions, and I was like, what am I even doing? And then I just did it, and then as soon as you do it, it's like, that's not such a big deal, So then you do it again. The only thing I would say was an exception was when I jumped off a really high cliff. And I jumped once, and I wasn't like, that wasn't a big deal. I was like, that was a big deal, and I never want to do that again. So there are maybe certain things, but at least I did it, right? I did it. And now I know that that's not my favorite thing to do. But there's a lot of things, like, if you want to get to a certain place in life, so if I decided I wanted to be a cliff jumper, I better get to that first cliff, and then I better move up. Well, if I want to be a public speaker, if I want to be a business person, if I want to be, do better in my marriage, or be a better worker, or move my way up, whatever, you got to get to those terror barriers. Yes, love it.
Terror barriers, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Get over your fears. Yeah, you got to conquer it. And again, deal with the underlying things that might be holding you back. We all have stuff, like we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's just at different levels. Different people have different stuff, or it's, you could make levels like how bad it is. But I think it's just about addressing those, not being afraid to dig in and deal with them.
Yeah.
And just find the right kind of help with that. I wish, you mentioned earlier, like, I wish I would have understood, or not to wish my, to change my life. The pattern is what it is. I think everything that's happened to me in the order it happened was meant to. But if I can introduce people to these sorts of things, which I do often, mention these treatments and whatever, or books I've read or whatever it was, along with taking those steps and moving just a little closer to each fear, that combination, I think, just, you can have, in a positive way, explosive growth as a person, and just move towards, the experiences you want to have in life instead of what you don't want, how you want to contribute into the world, and how you want to grow as a person. It's kind of those three things that it brings you into, I think. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. And I see your life, like, as you're unfolding this, I'm like, okay, so now what you're doing in your work is you're helping people with their fitness and nutrition. But we all know, well, maybe not everybody, but you and I both know that when you start talking about people's fitness and nutrition, it goes a lot deeper than that. All of a sudden you get those limiting beliefs start to come up, those like terror barriers, those come up, everything starts to come up. And so that's why with my coaching, I'm going into more like life coaching as well, because these things need to be addressed, right? And so I feel like there you are in this pattern in your life where you've struggled with not feeling good enough. Almost everybody feels like that at some point, right? You've struggled with anxiety. There's a lot of people that go through anxiety. You struggled with all these different things, the barrier of being, like, man up, be the man and go do this. And yet you are naturally a sensitive person. So like, all of these traits with you having to get gritty, but then also figuring out a way to actually help yourself at a deeper level with these different
Mhm.
therapies. Now, like, I just think you are ready, Greg. Like, you are ready to be
Mhm.
so good at your job right now, so good at helping people with their fitness and nutrition and, whatever level. And you would not have gotten there had you not struggled with those things as well. And had you not been created with that like more sensitive type of personality or whatever. Like even on my messages back and forth with you and some of your comments, like I can sense that in you, that you are more of a sensitive person. And isn't
Sure.
that a blessing? And maybe for you, sometimes it became a bit of a curse for you because maybe it held you back in certain ways or it made you feel inadequate or whatever. But I mean, now, like that's your what am I trying to say? That's your superpower, right? Maybe
Mhm.
that you are more sensitive. Maybe you can be more
Yeah.
empathetic now because of what you've gone through. And like you said, when you hit that wall, that train wreck, like you can also understand now when people go through burnout, when people go
Yeah.
through like a nervous type breakdown or whatever they call it now. That's
Yeah.
huge. And as much as
Mhm.
it was horrible to go through, like if I was having problems, I'd want to go to you right now, based on what you shared, because I'd like, he gets me, he understands, right?
Sure. Yep.
So, yeah. Have
Yeah.
you ever thought of that? Like you're doing fitness and nutrition, but have you thought of helping people at a deeper level, or maybe you're already doing that?
Um, I I do it already without them necessarily knowing it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I do talk about it. So if I'm on a call with someone that's considering moving into our program, and I guess a lot of this too. Let me just say this real quick: is that
Hmm.
a lot of people do again doubt themselves over time, and just with this pattern of like, not even a year ago, I was on the verge of possibly divorce. I had a nervous breakdown last winter, 6 or 8 months ago. Um, had to make a massive pivot several months ago, even business wise, and now I have a successful business. Like
Hmm.
that's consistently starting to be successful and everything. So I just want to say that's part of the magic of actually addressing these things in life.
Hmm.
And why you do what you're doing now, these podcasts and everything, is you're trying to bring these stories out. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're wanting to show other people that they can do it. I mean, that's one of the
Hmm.
big things here, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just it bothers me so much, and yet my heart goes out to these people that feel like they can't do something. And I mean, I have a similar story, Greg. I was the fourth of six kids, so I kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit, and I was little Carla. Like we'll send her on errands because she's too small and weak to like help with the cows, and she'll just run errands all the time. So I got to be very fast, but like I just was, and it's not that my parents tried to put that on me. It's not that there was anything negative, but just in that situation and feeling kind of small and how I
Yep.
had to push those barriers, those terror barriers over and over and over and over. And I'm still doing it. In fact, like I'm right in the middle of a huge terror barrier right now, of like, what's the next step in my business? Where do I go
Yep.
next? Right. And so you just have to keep pushing through. And that's my message to people. And I think your
Yep.
story really highlights that like so well of just overcoming the barriers and looking after things. Like you knew that you had some issues, so you took
Mhm.
care of it. You're like, you're
Mhm.
looking for help. You're trying to figure it out. And I think so often we have these things that are limiting us. We have these, these issues that we've developed or we've grown up with or whatever, and they're holding us back so profoundly from
Mhm.
living our potential, from really being able to help others. And if you
Mhm.
just deal with that, with whatever kind of therapy you need, whatever kind of, pushing through those terror barriers, whatever you need, get that support system, do
Mhm.
it. Like you're going to
Yep.
live such a great life. You're going to love your life and you're going to really feel like you can make an impact rather than sitting there in your little rut spinning your wheels. And I just see so
Yep.
many people spinning their wheels, and I've been there, you've been there. We know what it's
Yep.
like, and it's not good,
Yeah.
and it's not helping us, and it doesn't seem to help anybody else either,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And the further you go and progress, it seems like, and I think we've talked, like you've had some of this too,
Mhm.
is your the chinks in your armor, the weaknesses get exposed. So if you don't deal with them, as you accelerate and do these things and grow as a person, you're going to find them and they're going to come out if you haven't dealt with them already.
Mhm.
Embrace that. Like realize it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
one more thing, right? And it's okay. And it's part of the process. And just embrace it, do it, do your best to take care of it, get help where you need to, and keep
Mhm.
going. And so you asked about the coaching thing. Frankly, my overall goal is to incorporate I do incorporate all that side, the mindset and that stuff into my coaching for fitness and health.
I do
And
too. Yeah.
part of the reason I incorporate the word health there is because I don't want it just to be workouts and nutrition, because it's so much more. It's so much about the whole person. And I don't want to, I don't want to say treat, but to coach or deal with just those pieces. I want to coach the whole person because
Yes.
that's what gets them to their goals
Yes.
and actually changes their life. Right.
Mhm.
And so my goal overall is to, grow this business and affect lots of lives, help as many people as possible, provide value, service, all that kind of stuff. But, I foresee I'm going to be, an older dude here in the next 10 years or so. So
Yeah.
I might have to realize that at some point. And, but I'd like to build this business. And really, I do want to transition into more kind of, I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but like life coaching, business coaching, all that kind of stuff more wrapped into one, and bring out a lot of what I thought were my weaknesses that I'm finding are my strengths of being more intuitive, empathic, all those types of things, yet being the gritty, dude that has that side too and will push through anything because I don't give up. I don't quit. You can knock me down a million times into the depths of hell and I will come back and I will keep going. And I'm doing that right now after the worst crap I could imagine enduring in life. So
you are a beautiful,
so keep going.
You are a beautiful balance of that, Greg, of that grittiness. Like seriously, I don't know that I've met somebody so incredibly like driven to like almost like in a crazy way, like in a, oh my goodness, this guy is going to do anything to get where he needs to go. Like he is like, he's not leaving anything on the table. It's gone. And so that just like really spoke to me. And then like, also like you have that, but you also have that empathy, that sensitivity of like really being able to help others. And I just think like, what a combination, So Greg, like absolutely, like you saying, your weakness becomes your strength. Absolutely. Like, and I just see that in your life. And I'm so excited for you, Greg, because, like there's so much more in your life and like you're just kind of beginning. And I feel that way in my life too. It's like, oh, Carla, you're pushing 40. Yeah, but I'm just beginning. Like I got my whole life ahead of me and I'm going to do what I can. And I know that you are going to be working hard and doing everything that you can and making such a big impact on people's lives, you and your wife. So Greg, thank you so much for sharing your story. Do you have would you like to tell us where we can go to find you? Like where's the best place to connect with you?
Absolutely. So again, our company is called Brilliant Life Fitness. So we do have brilliantlifefitness.com and our coaching program is the Fit Life Formula. So again, we use strategy. So it's a formula of putting things together. So, and kind of our overarching mantra, I guess, is we help people kind of discover their inner athlete or bring out that athlete. We all have a best self, a best genetic expression that's tucked in there somewhere. And we try to help people find that, right? So they can look, feel, and perform like an athlete forever. And that's the goal. And so on our website, there's actually a form where you can reach out. You can go right to the main page. There's a gift there for you if you like. And if you go down to the bottom, you'll see kind of the product area. And you can actually reach out and apply for our coaching program if anybody's interested in seeing if this is a fit for them and a possibility of us helping them. So.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I mean, you and I are just like, we got to keep connecting, Greg, because you and I are doing the same thing. We're basically doing the same thing. You're doing it in a slightly different way than I am, but man, like it's exciting. It's exciting to talk to you. So thank you so much, Greg, for sharing. Just really appreciate your time.
Thanks again for having me.
You bet. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.